We're here. We're finally here. I'm about to talk about The Dark Knight. How am I going to encapsulate how awesome this movie is? This is my favorite movie to ever come out of DC. There's so much that's great about it, there's so much that will continue to be great about it, and I just have no idea how I'm going to fit it all into one video. There might have to be some spoilers. I know, but I just can't help it. There are just some things in this movie that I'm gonna have to talk about here. So, spoiler warning if you're one of the 0 people on this world who have never seen The Dark Knight. For the rest of us, let's gush. The Dark Knight. So The Dark Knight is a sequel to Batman Begins. It's once again directed by Christopher Nolan. It came out in July of 2008. So to put it into perspective, it came out a couple months after the first Iron Man. I was in middle school when this movie came out, and when I saw it in theaters for the first time, it blew my freaking mind. In fact, if memory serves, I think I saw this movie 2 days in a row in theaters, and both times in IMAX, because that was just the way to see this movie. So The Dark Knight takes place, I'm pretty sure it's a year after the events of Batman Begins, maybe less. The Batman has established himself in Gotham City as a real threat to the criminals out there and the mob, so it looks like we're doing a pretty good job of cleaning this city up until a new threat comes along. That threat? I'll get to later. Gotham City has a new district attorney, Harvey Dent, played by Aaron Eckhart, who, this is funny, to this day, this is the only movie I've seen Aaron Eckhart in. What's he done since this? Has he done anything good? If he has done anything, it wasn't really worth noting, I guess. But Harvey Dent is really enthusiastic about cleaning up the city as well. He's working with the Batman through Jim Gordon, who is a lot more prominent in this movie. I do mean that, actually. Gary Oldman is really good as Jim Gordon here. He and Batman and Harvey Dent, they're really working together to clean up Gotham City. They really care about the people and just eradicating crime for good. Rachel Dawes is still in play, but the character was recast for this movie. In Batman Begins, she was played by Katie Holmes, but now for The Dark Knight, she's played by Maggie Gyllenhaal. Which, honestly speaking, I guess I do prefer Maggie Gyllenhaal in the role. Not that I didn't like Katie Holmes. I think they both did a good job, really. You know, they served the movies they were in well. But honestly, I think it comes down to the writing. Rachel's dialogue in this movie is a lot better than her dialogue in Batman Begins, in my opinion. She's more credible as a lawyer. She's dating Harvey Dent, which is a really important part of the movie, because that makes her important not just to Bruce Wayne, but now also to Harvey Dent. So it looks like we're doing a good job cleaning up Gotham City, and now we come to it. Our new threat. You know him, you love him, the Joker, played by Heath Ledger. At this point, almost 12 and a half years after the movie's release, I can't say anything about Heath Ledger's Joker that you haven't already heard. This Joker is the villain that steals the entire movie. Not just every scene he's in, but the entire movie. Even the scenes he's not in, you're still thinking about him. His first real introductory scene is when he walks into that kitchen with all those mob people, and he does that laugh, that hoo, he, ha, aha, and I thought my jokes were bad. Just with that intro, you can tell, oh, this guy's gonna steal every room he's in, he's gonna own it, and that is exactly what he does. Heath Ledger's Joker owns every room he walks into. His presence, not just his costume design and his makeup, which is top-notch in this movie, but his dialogue. I have entire Joker monologues from this movie memorized because I've seen it so many damn times. One of the best is, of course, when he has Gamble by the mouth and he goes, "You wanna know how I got these scars? My father was a drinker and a fiend." You're watching that scene with your jaw on the floor because you're just so in awe of Heath Ledger's performance. The tragedy of it all is, of course, that Heath Ledger died of an overdose shortly before this movie came out. It was quite the sad loss. I mean, I didn't know anything about Heath Ledger when it happened, myself being in middle school and all. And actually, just like Aaron Eckhart, to this day, this is the only movie I've ever seen Heath Ledger in. True story. But I will say he completely deserved the posthumous Oscar he got. And I don't think anyone's going to argue that. Whenever I watch this movie, I just can't help but quote the Joker's lines along with him. One of the greatest things about the Joker in this movie is that you can't ever really pin down what kind of villain he is. Is he the kind of villain that just does stuff and makes it up as he goes along? For quite a few years, I thought he was. But then I realized a couple years ago that no, he is the villain that actually plans everything down to the detail with backup plans for just in case his original plan doesn't go through. So he's not the kind of Joker that's just crazy and insane. I mean, clearly he has a few loose wires up there, but he is a smart guy. He's a tactician. The reason that's so hard to figure out is because of the way he acts. Because he certainly doesn't act like a tactician. He acts like he doesn't give a shit about anything. The way he walks, the way he talks with that, it gives off the notion that he doesn't really know what he's doing when he absolutely does. It's brilliant. To use his own words, the Joker in this movie is an agent of chaos, and one of the best villains in any comic book movie ever. So those are my praises to Heath Ledger's Joker. That being said, as great as he is not the only thing that makes this movie great. The action scenes in this movie are beautiful. The cinematography is a lot better. See, the action scenes in Batman Begins, they were very shaky cam-ish. A lot of quick cuts, and they were really close in. In this movie, there are these car chases, there are just these wide shots and helicopter shots going over it. It's just awesome to look at. It's so visually stunning, especially if you watch the Blu-ray on your TV. Whenever it gets to a big action scene, it just blows out in IMAX. It goes from widescreen to full screen IMAX, which at this point in 2020 is textbook Christopher Nolan, but back in 2008, it was damn near unprecedented. I mean, just the very first scene in the movie, you sit down, you see the opening logos go by, and they're in widescreen, and then all of a sudden, boom, this big IMAX shot just going over buildings, and you're like, whoa, okay. Alright, I'm in for more than just a regular comic book action movie. Nah, I'm in for something special. And you absolutely are. And a lot of the visual effects are indeed practical. The scene about halfway through the movie where Batman's going after the Joker, and the Joker is driving that huge big rig, and Batman does the cables under it, and the truck flips over, that was all done in camera. They actually took a big rig and flipped it on its head. Awesome. The part a little bit before that where the tumbler crashes into that garbage truck, that was done with miniatures. Believe it or not. And how awesome is that? One of my favorite shots in the movie is where the Joker blows up the hospital. He's walking outside the hospital, it's blowing up behind him, the camera goes with him, it's all IMAX. It broadened the horizons for superhero movies. That's what it did. That's what The Dark Knight did. Because all the action scenes in this movie are just so big. I wish more action movies used IMAX like Christopher Nolan does, because that is just so awesome. As for Batman in this movie, he's got quite the awesome array of new gadgets. He's got the Batpod, which I accidentally called the Tumbler when I reviewed Batman Begins. The Batmobile in this trilogy is called the Tumbler. The Bat Cycle in this trilogy, that's the Batpod. And it is super cool. That same action scene where he flips the Joker's truck on its head is where you see the Batpod for the first time. It ejects out of the Tumbler. When that happened, when I first saw the movie, I was like, holy shit! Coolest thing about it is when it's drifting and coming to a stop, you see the wheel turning, that's just icing on the cake, man. That is super cool. And his new bat suit, I love the improvement it made with the neck. In Batman Begins, the neck piece went from his head down to his shoulders. In The Dark Knight, you actually see Bruce Wayne request to Lucius Fox a new batsuit in which he's able to turn his head, which is a great touch, by the way, that we actually see him request that. So now this new batsuit, the neck piece is skin tight around his neck. It's very tactical, very smart, and it looks good. So even more points to the movie for that. There is something to be said about Batman's voice, though. In Batman Begins, he did use a gravelly voice, but he still used his vocal cords in it, so it sounded like this. Where were the other drugs going? And now in The Dark Knight, to really protect his identity, he just commits to the gravelly voice. Some of the marked bills I gave you, if I get them to you, can you get him to talk? It is easy to make fun of that voice, but honestly, I don't have a huge problem with it. In fact, it adds to the dark vibe of the movie. Now, here's where the spoilers are gonna come in, because I just had to talk about what happens at the end of this movie. Of course, the spoiler warning shouldn't mean shit to you since you've seen the movie, right? Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Two-Face, because there's a really cool story of when I first saw this movie when it comes to Two-Face. See, at the time, I had heard of the villain Two-Face as a Batman villain, but I actually had no idea that Two-Face's identity was Harvey Dent. I didn't know that. So about 2/3 of the way through the movie, when Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face, you could imagine my surprise when I saw it for the first time. I was like, oh, we have two major Batman villains in this movie. Awesome. Yeah, I had no clue throughout all the marketing and trailers and TV spots leading up to this movie's release. No idea that Harvey Dent was gonna be Two-Face. I'll never forget that surprise. And of course, Two-Face in this movie is completely awesome. He's not around for long, but when he is, it's pretty cool. Pretty menacing, pretty dark scenes with Two-Face. Seriously, just all sorts of props to Aaron Eckhart. I'm honestly shocked that we haven't seen him in anything really huge since The Dark Knight, because I genuinely thought that he and his butt chin were perfect. And of course, I have to talk about the score. Once again, it was done by maestros Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard. And yeah, of course, they bring back all the Batman themes from Batman Begins, that awesome 2-note theme that I love. But they gave the Joker a new theme, and it is so tension, just grinding. Just that one note on the distorted guitar going up, that yeah, that'll be held for what feels like 5 minutes, and you're just sitting there on the edge of your seat, grinding your teeth. You're like, oh god, what's the Joker gonna do? Because he's unpredictable. And then when the Joker does something, it's all da-dun, da-dun. I'm telling you, man, it's badass music. So in the end, The Dark Knight It's The Dark Knight. You've already heard all this movie's praises from over the years. I'm just here adding fuel to that fire. It's one of the greatest sequels ever made, one of the best comic book movies ever made, the very best DC movie ever made, with one of the best comic book movie villains of all time. I love the action scenes in The Dark Knight. I love the score. I love what Batman goes through in this movie. I love Jim Gordon's role. I love Harvey Dent. Just this movie is a freaking masterpiece. It's Christopher Nolan's best movie, if you ask me. And I'm pretty sure it always will be. So The Dark Knight. Have you seen it? Of course you have. So I'm not even gonna ask you what you think about it because I know you love it. So instead I'm gonna ask you, what is the best sequel of all time for you? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe. Here's my card.